Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it.
Of music, the pacing, the editing. I mean, compared to the model railroad hobby, where maybe we could talk about this, but I mean,
we already are.
You oh, okay.
because because what you were saying was really interesting. So about 14 seconds ago, I hit the record button.
Oh, fantastic! Nice.
Yeah, so Rob, you go back into the green room.
Oh, all right, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Derek.
Well, I was looking at Rob's videos before we hopped on, and they were really well produced. And every model railroad video, and this is a little bit of a generalization, but it seems to start with the author or the host of the video talking to the camera, apologizing about, hey, I'm sorry I haven't posted a video here, but I've had this going on and this going on, and here's the update. This is my first update since my last update. And then you pull up Rob's videos, and they're tightly produced, they're tightly edited. He gets right into it. There's music. There's no dead air. There's no fidgeting with the camera. It just looks so well done, and they're addicting to watch. You start watching and keep watching.
That's what. Yeah. So I mean, that's why I kind of thought, hey, you and I talked about it, and I'd been wanting to for quite some time. I keep going back to. I think I'm finally going to bite the bullet and do it. But there's this guy. He goes by Rob Roy, and he was in the Navy. And he has tons of videos. He set up all kinds of GoPro cameras. Number one, I was surprised he was allowed to do it, but he has all these GoPro cameras, 2 or 3 GoPro cameras set up in the cockpit of these. I think they're called C2s. I think our friend Andy Zimmerman told us they're called C2s, and they're basically transport planes that take off and land from aircraft carriers. And he's got all kinds of videos of him taking off and landing. And they're incredibly informative. And I'm like, man, I'd love to talk to this guy. And as I've said to you many, many times, like with Rob, I saw his videos and I thought, man, these are good videos. And it's like, you can't call up a complete stranger and go, hey, Rob, would you mind talking on the phone for about an hour? But if you approach them and go, hey, we've got this podcast, and I know all the people that listen to the podcast would really like to hear from you. Would you mind coming on? And really, all we're doing is recording phone conversations that I would like to have.
But I think you represent the audience really well because you're a curious person. And I think going outside the hobby of model railroading, where things seem to move slowly, to other hobbies will help the model railroaders who listen to evolve and learn new tips and techniques. When I worked at a hobby shop that was 50% plastic models, 50% model trains, this is 15 years ago, I was shocked at how advanced the techniques and the paints and the weathering and all of the technology and techniques that have been developed by plastic modelers that model railroaders had no idea about. And I would learn a ton about washes and filters, even just like the metallic paints from those guys that I had no idea about as a model railroader. And so I think it's going to inform. I hope it informs the audience, and I hope everybody can learn something that they can apply to their hobby, no matter which hobby we're talking to.
And I don't know if this makes sense, but as you were saying that, I was thinking, model railroaders tend to get off into the weeds about the particular subject, about where did this railroad run, and here's a timetable, and this is the exact station in Reading, Pennsylvania, and things like that. And with other hobbies, like with RC, like we talked to Chris Wolf there from RC Geek, and he replicated the planes. He liked doing the colors properly and replicating the planes properly. But I don't think you spend as much time, when you're building a particular plane, you don't go, now this particular plane landed on this particular aircraft carrier, and it would need X number of feet of runway, whereas model railroaders would go, the Corsair needed know, 2,873 feet to take off properly. Whereas I think a lot of other hobbies, they just are, painting and building and trying to replicate what it is they want to do, but without a whole lot less research.
Yeah, it's a good point. Maybe we're too precise and too in the details, and maybe we need to relax a little bit. Like, I'll give you an example. If I'm looking at like super detailing a locomotive, I want to see somebody who's ideally drilled grab irons for the same type of locomotive and in the same scale that's done it the exact same project. So I want to see who's done an Alco RS switcher, the Bowser detail kit. I can't find that. But when I'm looking at a weathering project and I'm like, how can I fade this blue to the color that I want on this, X Wabash locomotive? Well, then I can go to the military modeling side and just look for people who faded blue paint. And it doesn't really matter what the subject was. It's still, you're just fading factory paint with either acrylics or enamels or oils or whatever. I think the plastic modeling side, the wargaming side of the hobby, there's more flexibility and more just like emphasis on techniques than like exact recipes for how to do this specific project for this specific locomotive.
Yeah, and that's all the time we have. Yeah. So for this particular episode, we're talking to a guy, and his channel is Spikey, Spikey Bits, BITS. And he also has a website, spikybits.com. And first question we're going to ask him is, how did he come up with the name Spiky Bits? Because does he eat bits of spike, or does he comb his hair in spiky ways, or what? That's so. Get him in. Rob, could you come in now? I turned on the intercom. Rob, could you come into the studio, please?
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Rob. After listening to that 7 minutes of podcasting, do you feel like you still want to stay, or?
So, yeah, no, I really like scale modeling in general. So that was I don't know what what did you say? Iron works for. You lost me at that one, but the rest of it I was on board for.
Yeah. So basically, I stumbled across your channel as YouTube offers things up that, hey, you might want to watch this. And like, you're primarily into wargaming, right?
Yeah, for most of my content is wargaming.
And how long have you been doing that?
So I've been publishing for about 15 years now. I guess it would be 16 this year. So 16 years on the site, and I guess the YouTube channel is about the same age. So yeah, almost 20 years.
20 years. And so that's how long you've been into the hobby, or that's how long you've been on social media?
No, I've been in the Warhammer hobby since the late 80s. And I was actually into scale modeling before that. So I have a little bit of modeling experience on the scale side, but I got more interested in the gaming side of things as Warhammer and a lot of other games kind of came out and rose to prominence, in the late 80s and early 90s.
And what exactly, I want to get into some of your techniques and painting and 3D building and all that stuff. But before we do that, what exactly is wargaming?
Well, I guess wargaming is kind of a catch-all for, I guess you would have to specify miniature wargaming, because wargaming in general, you could simulate full-scale battles, military battles, and that's technically wargaming. But miniature wargaming to me is just any game that involves physical models on a tabletop with a set of rules. You know what I mean?
And so, like, I'm starting to understand that there's like several different types of wargaming. Is there like I understand what you say, like there's battleship and recreating actual wars, but wargaming seems to be something with imagined characters and things like that. And is there several different arms of that?
Yeah, there's quite a few miniature games out there nowadays. We're kind of spoiled for choice. You've got everything from Star Wars to Marvel to a lot of different Warhammer titles. You've got traditional historicals, as they call them. Like if you want to reenact the Battle of Waterloo in any particular scale, you can do that. American Civil War, um, near future stuff, current era stuff. It's wild.
And do you get together with other people to do this in person?
Yeah, generally, I mean, there are some digital versions that a lot of people got into, over lockdown and everything. But I personally, I mean, if you're gonna spend all that time painting and putting the models together, you might as well, play with somebody in person. But sometimes you don't have time for that, and that's okay too.
And so I'm assuming there's like conventions and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, there's a dedicated miniature wargaming convention that is once a year. I guess the biggest one it's in Milwaukee this year. It's called Adepticon. But then you might have heard of Gen Con, which is more just general gaming, like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff.
Right. And did wargaming kind of come from Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, it's yes or no as far as that goes, because I would say it helped make it popular, because some folks are like, well, you know what? I don't want to use my imagination. I want to see the stuff. I want to, because in a lot of ways, wargaming is just like model railroading, because you set up terrain, hills, buildings, stuff like that. And there's different templates and things for different missions. But, a lot of people wanted that visualization, whereas stuff like Dungeons and Dragons, it's a lot more, it's in your mind more. Like you're building the picture in your mind. You're not looking at it. So I think you probably remember, like, you've heard of like Little Wars, like H.G. Wells. Like he made, I guess, what is considered the first like miniature war game and set of rules and stuff. And then a lot of historical clubs and things in Europe in the 50s and 60s picked up on that and painted models and cast them, on pewter and things, and played these big battles. Like Peter Cushing, you might remember him. He was in the Star Wars movies. He was really big into that himself. So you can kind of trace it back to like the 40s. Wow. So it's been around.
Okay, so now, like you say, you were in plastic modeling before you got into this. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested. This is a question I'm probably going to end up asking everybody eventually, but what possessed you to start like a YouTube channel and a website and start sharing your knowledge?
Honestly, it was just kind of trying to stay motivated to continue, to like accomplish my hobby projects. Like, because putting together a whole bunch of models and painting them to get enough to play a full-scale army, it's a bit of a task. And there's a lot more stuff out there these days, like hobby tools and hobby products that help you do it a lot quicker. But sometimes it's just, a thing of staying motivated. And I thought, well, I could take pictures of me painting my stuff and just kind of talking about it. And it would keep me motivated, because then if people are like, hey, that's cool, then I'd be like, oh yeah, I got to get it done because people want to see, my progress. And that's kind of how it all started.
And so with model railroading, I miss the 80s and 90s because it was much more building stuff. Like to just give you a brief example, is there's one company would produce these beautiful, well-running models, really ran well, but they would. It was very easy to buy them in undecorated form, so that it was left up to you to paint them and detail them more. And this was quite common in the 80s and 90s. And then the hobby went away from that. And to buy undecorated stuff now is almost impossible. And when we were talking to our friend Chris Wolf in the RC plane, it seems like that hobby's gone the same way, where what was the acronym they used? ARF?
It was ARF, almost ready to fly.
Planes.
Yep.
So in wargaming, it seems like to me that half the fun of the hobby is the painting. There's not much assembly, is there? But the painting is where it's at, isn't it?
It depends on the assembly. Hopefully that's the only time I say it depends. But this show, because everything, there's a asterisk on everything. But there's easy to build, or ETB as they call it, which generally can be like a push fit type deal. But most kits are multi-part, and that's kind of half the fun too. Is that you get to kind of build it and pose it and put the the different shoulder pads, or like the different unit markings, or helmets, or conversion parts, whatever you want. It's kind of like your creation, and then you get to paint it, and that's your creation, and then you get to, well, hopefully at that point you already figured out what's in your army, but that's also part of the creation, is figuring out your army list, and then you play.
So I wonder, Derek, if that's because wargaming seems to be incredibly popular, and I wonder if that's the difference between model railroading now. I mean, model railroading it's still the thrill of building your layout and putting your structure kits together. But I wonder, Derek, if that's the difference now. With wargaming, there's so much that you need to accomplish in order to, like, I'm sure you can buy pre-painted and ready to go pieces for wargaming. But it sounds like the most fun is painting and assembling the pieces to have them ready to go.
Yeah, that does seem. It's interesting that there's so much configuration, and it's not just configuration, but there's so much thought into the composition of your army. It's like you are a military planner, and then you're also assembling, and then you're painting and decorating. And I think what's interesting is that there's a tangible unit, like there's this soldier or this tank or whatever. Whereas model railroaders tend to think of, I have to build the entire layout, I have to build the entire army. I think there's probably joy in smaller individual units for wargamers, so that everything seems a little easier to accomplish and easier to scale.
You have an excellent website, Rob. I mean, let's repeat we'll put it on when we release the episode, we'll put it on our website too. But the URL for your website is Spikey Bits. How'd you come up with the name SpikeyBits.com? How did you come up with the name Spikey Bits?
So, I don't know. I just thought it sounded cool.
It does sound cool.
It is, yes.
It's a piece of war gear it doesn't exist anymore, but it existed about the time, 15 years ago when I started all this. And I was just like, man, that sounds pretty cool. So it just all kind of came together.
and so, okay. So like your tutorials are like, I mean, there's like so much stuff on your website. Like, I highly recommend anybody goes to this website, whether you're a model railroader or an RC guy or whatever you are. I mean, I would highly recommend, because you have examples of your videos here, and they're just great. So what I wanted to talk to you about painting. So I wanted to get in, because we're only allowed about an hour. The network only gives us about an hour.
Oh man,
they're really strict about it.
Yeah,
we get in trouble if we go over. Yeah.
We had a bit of a problem, and we have this Wednesday night chat. We have a free channel on Monday, and on Tuesday it's a paid channel. And for the it's our Patreon channel. And if you're a Patreon member, there's a chat group that gets together every Wednesday, and they were insistent that they would like shorter podcasts. And so yeah, you have to follow the crowd. It was primarily Chris Adams' fault, but I don't want to name names.
Yeah, we're not naming any names. Hey, Lionel, before we get into the painting, I have one question about the broader wargaming hobby.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I think one of the interesting things to me is there's exactly one shop in my area that sells model trains, but there are like at least 3 or 4 different, I guess you can call them shops, but they're more like cafes or hangout spots for wargaming. And it strikes me as really interesting that wargaming seems like a really social hobby, because you have to game against somebody else. Can you talk a little bit about when you are gaming and operating with somebody, like that sort of community aspect of the hobby?
Well, I think it's unique Well, I guess some of the card games, it's the same way, but the matches don't last nearly as long. Like a lot of war games still last, 2.5, 3 hours, and that may or may not include a little bit of setup time. But we have a podcast too. It's called The Long War. If I can plug it real quick.
Sure. What's it called? What's it called?
It's called The Long War.
The Long War. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And where can people find that?
I think it's pretty much everywhere. Like, I think it's hosted on Libsyn maybe, but you can just go to longwar.net and it will kind of feed all into it. Or I'm not sure what will come up first if you Google it, but I'm sure there's something.
Yeah. Well, and this podcast comes out of Libsyn as well. So yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a part. The social contract. Yeah. So the cool thing about this is we advocate a lot of not playing against your opponent, because I mean it's a game and there's a winner and a loser, right? But we advocate more for like playing with your opponent. You know what I mean? Like, so you're going to be standing there at a table with somebody that you may or may not know for 3 hours. So instead of making it miserable because you want to be like a rules lawyer and like question every little thing, it is a social contract. So you kind of it's easy to forget and get really wrapped up in the game itself instead of taking a step back and be like, hey, this is a dude that enjoys a thing that I enjoy too, and this is very hard to find, and kind of wrapping your head around that and being like, because if you go to work and you find somebody that's into the same hobby as you, that's really cool because then you have something to talk about. But like, I think having a place to go to, it's kind of like a bar for nerds in a lot of ways, right? And some of them do serve beer, believe it or not, which is cool. But yeah, you just kind of go there. You set up, play a thing. Some stores have a membership fee that you can pay. A lot of stores are kind of going that way because these tables take up too much space. Well, not too much, but a lot of space. And space is a commodity. You generally want it to be earning for you. And sometimes there's stuff online, and you want to encourage people to buy from your store, but you also have to monetize the space you have as a responsible fiscal store owner. So yeah, it's pretty cool it's like going to the bar sort of, I guess, and hanging out and playing a game.
So if you go to one of these bars for nerds, which I think is a great word for it, like, are you going with the thought that I'm going to play, like I have an appointment to play, or can you just go and hang out and take it in?
I mean, a little of both. Every store is different. They're all basically a snowflake because some stores are a business enterprise. Some stores are, somebody's, for lack of a better term, maybe clubhouse, like where they're like retired or some such, and they're just like, hey, you know what? I just want a place to go hang out. And if it makes some money, that's cool too. So everyone's kind of set up a little different. I mean, the ones in my area, and there might be like 4 or 5 of them within an hour's drive, like diameter. But yeah, I mean, you can go in there, you can buy stuff, you can buy paints, you can buy the kits themselves. A lot of them have snacks and sodas. And you can also, if other people are playing, watch, or just, some of them have an actual, like, high top bar with chairs where you can, or tables where you can actually, work on your models or paint your models if you bring your paints and stuff. And they have little lights and things.
Can you give us an example of one of these places? Like a name of one of the, where do you, if you don't mind me asking, where exactly do you live?
I'm in Southern Pines, North Carolina, which is, right next to Pinehurst, which I'm told has really great golf. And that's about an hour south of Raleigh. The store I frequent here is called Bazooka Games, and they don't have like a bar with beer, but they do have a painting bar, as we call it. So they have lights, and you can bring your stuff in and put it together and paint if you want.
What did you call that bar? What did you call the bar? A pinging bar? Painting bar.
Yeah.
Okay. Derek, I got good news for you and I got bad news.
Okay.
Because you're young and full of vim and vigor.
Yeah.
Years ago, I talked to one of the guys at Lipson, the people that host this podcast, and apparently, let me see what's your podcast called. Hang on, I'm on your page now. Long War TV. There it is, right there. So you guys actually do video as well as your podcast is video as well as audio.
Yeah, we do. We stream it live, like on different platforms.
Sure. Anyways, years ago, I was talking to one of the guys at Lipson, and he was like disgusted at my my website that I use for my Lipson. And these guys, I went to their podcast, and their website is beautiful. That you can do through Lipson. So what we need is somebody to figure that out.
So it sounds like I'm building a website.
Well, it sounds like it sounds like it could be. Yeah. These guys have got like 460 episodes.
Wow.
Yeah, and you're
right. This website is better than ours.
It's way better than ours. We're pathetic.
Oh no!
Well, everybody already said that. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly.
This isn't breaking news.
The biggest problem with our podcast, Rob, is the guy in charge is an old guy, but he doesn't think he's an old guy, but basically he is.
Are we speaking metaphorically?
No, we're speaking to him.
And is the guy in charge in the room with us right now?
Yeah, exactly.
He can't hurt you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I'm getting the podcast out. Leave me alone. So who are these other two guys in your podcast?
So we have four. So we had Mike Haspel was on our podcast for a number of years, and he had, took some time off and did some other things, and now he's back. And then on the regular, our regular co-host is Kenny Boucher, who is a literal Florida man, if that paints any pictures for you.
Nice.
You can probably pick him out in the picture. And and Wyatt, who is out in California, and it's just, typical gamer guy. And both of them have their own streams where they also stream, like live stream painting miniatures and things on Twitch. And I might cross over to YouTube too. Kenny's got a YouTube channel for sure. Yeah, Wyatt's got a YouTube channel too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the guy with the glasses and the San Diego hat, I'm guessing is his name's Wyatt, right?
Yeah, that one's Wyatt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he looks like trouble. We'll have to get Wyatt. We'll have to get Wyatt on here one day and talk to him too. And what's the other fella's name?
Kenny.
Kenny. What part of Florida is he in?
I think he's in Ocala right now.
Okay, right now. I'm actually in Florida right now myself. We got Florida, we got North Carolina, and we got Alabama.
Oh, okay.
Roll Tide.
There you go.
That's right.
You're supposed to say roll. You're supposed to say Roll Tide. I say Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, roll.
Yeah. I think it's just Roll Tide. I think that sounds better. And it says, and you say it with kind of a lilting, like we're going to crush you. So Roll Tide. Yeah.
there's some arrogance, some smugness.
Yes. Yeah. You have to say roll. Yeah. You have to say Roll Tide with smugness. Yes. Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yep. We don't have a lot in Alabama, but we have football.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have a lot in Alabama, but you have Nick Saban. I had a really good question, but it's a long time since I thought of it, so I've forgotten
it. Should we talk about paints now that I distracted us for 20 minutes?
No, not really, because there's I am. Yeah, maybe we should. Because there's so much cool stuff on your this is very cool. This is I really like this whole approach that we're going to be talking to other people, because this is very interesting, very, very interesting. Now I lost your, you're into 3D printing. Okay. Let's talk about paints. Because, our buddy Joe Desmond, who is an end scaler, and he models, the Conrail Railroad in end scale, and he has a beautiful layout. He's one of these guys. His layout is very professionally done. It's a beautiful layout. And we were talking to him, and we were talking about painting vehicles, and he said he used Army Painter paints. and he can brush them on. They're that good. That's what got me interested in that. And so I'm wondering, like, what kind of paint do you use?
So I do use Army Painter. There's about 3 brands that I frequent when I paint stuff. Probably the easiest brand to find out there, if you go into any of these gaming stores, is going to be Games Workshop, who makes the game Warhammer. They have their own paint line, and those stores usually stock that above all else. So you're always going to be able to find those colors. So a lot of recipes and things will involve their colors, but the Army Painter was founded by some ex-Games Workshop employees about the same time I started doing all my writing and things, 15, 16 years ago. And they've really built up their brand over that time. And they just launched a full-scale revamp of their paint line last year, I think it was. So they are really out there with some top-notch paint. And then there's another brand called Monument Hobbies. They make pro acrylic, as they call it. And that is another ex-Games Workshop employee that recently got back into things with on the streaming side before COVID, and just took his application of art and his background in art and just ran with it, and has been making all sorts of hobby stuff ever since.
I remember the question I was going to ask you, and we'll as you probably already been able to determine, we don't work from notes here.
Oh, okay. No show notes. Got it.
It's more just a crazy old guy bringing up subjects. But I remembered what I wanted to ask you when you were talking about the podcast and that stuff. Like, has the hobby grown because of social media? Because model railroading is basically, me personally, I think model railroading is exploding because of the availability of social media, and people are now coming out of their, it was like you'd be in your basement building your railroad, and you'd know the guys in the local club, and you'd know your guys maybe in your local organizations. But once social media came around, like, I talked to guys all over the world. I talked to Rob in Switzerland, and who's a police officer, and I talked to, Peter in England, and and I'm talking to Derek right now in Alabama, and in Carolina. Like, it's just the world just kind of exploded. And did you find that with gaming, that social media is just a huge asset to the whole thing?
Yeah, I think social media is a huge benefit. Besides the obvious pitfalls of getting in food fights with folks, but for not only organizing and staying in contact with people that have the same hobby in mind, and even to schedule games and things. I think that was a big thing. But my personal working theory is the thing that really kind of brought everything to the forefront and really kind of opened things up, like, hey, it's cool to be a nerd, was that show Big Bang Theory. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Right, yeah. Well, I'm not that square. I'm not that old. like, come on. Hang on. Before we go on here, do I sound that square? Or like,
no.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what folks watch anymore. I hear people talking about shows I never even heard of. And
I used to watch a show. I don't know if you'd ever heard of it, called Seinfeld.
I love Seinfeld. My dad loved that show.
Well, yeah. Okay, well, if we're going to talk shows, then how about Sky King?
Sky King? No, I don't think I've heard of that.
Yeah, the black and white show from the early 60s. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So anyways, I cut you off there, as I have a tendency to do.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I think the show really kind of made it cool to be a nerd, because they got in they were playing board games at some points. I'm sure they had something in there about model railroading that I never saw. It's just a lot of different things, playing D&D. And then there was another show that came out a few years later called Stranger Things that was kind of more of a retro type deal, but it had a lot of Dungeons and Dragons references, like them playing the games and kind of getting in real life adventures and things. And again, really kind of resonated with a lot of folks too, that I think really helped with, and then people just want to get back in touch with other people now too, after being all cooped up for a couple of years too, I think.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to do a lightning round now, Derek.
Okay.
Because I think there's a lot of cool technical things that we could cover that could be applied to model railroading. So I'm just going to kind of go through, again, everybody go to his website, spikybits.com. Really, really good website. Airbrushes. You got what's your choice of airbrush?
So I think we have a list on there, and it might even be on any article you click on. You can see the top 10 airbrushing list. I have 2 currently hooked up right now. My girlfriend got me the Ultra 2024 for Christmas. And this is a great beginner airbrush. It's very easy to use and very forgiving. And I think this runs about $120, which is, for the value and the quality of this particular airbrush. It's German engineering. It's very good. I also have another German airbrush from the company is called Harder and Steenbeck. Their Infinity airbrush with it's got an aluminum body, and it's a little bit more finicky, but I can keep it. I can upkeep it and stuff. It's probably wouldn't be the best for a beginner, but there's a running theory that a lot of folks like to say, and you might have even had this idea yourself, is a lot of folks want a good beginner airbrush recommendation. And everybody else on the podcast, the Longmore podcast, we tend to just say, hey, just spend the money on whatever you want. You can't hurt it. It's not going to hurt you. You're not going to hurt it. But get that good quality. Don't buy a junky one. And because what happens is, if you buy these junk cheap ones, they are junk and they are cheap, and you're not going to learn right, and you're going to get discouraged, and you're going to be like, airbrushing isn't for me. And you know what I mean?
And well, for me, and did you have trouble starting to I mean, I think a common thread, this is an interesting subject to talk to pretty much every modeler. I'll write this down, Derek, if you don't mind. But I think this is a common thread that you could have with pretty much every hobbyist, whether it be RC cars, planes, wargaming, model railroading, building plastic models. Airbrushing is a common theme because so many people are afraid to try it because it seems like it's really, really hard to do. And I mean, I just have one of my go-to airbrushes is just a cheap Badger, like 150 single action. That was the very first airbrush I ever bought, a long time ago, probably before you were born. How old? If you don't mind me asking, Rob, how old are you? Just roughly.
Believe it or not, I'm almost 50.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you might want to see a doctor.
I have several.
Well, Rob, that was rude, and I apologize.
It won't be the last rude thing he says.
No, fair enough. Exactly.
Yes.
I've heard way worse. Don't
So I mean, I still have that airbrush, and I still use it because if you keep it clean and everything, I mean, it's very, very, very basic. But you get the fine head and the medium head, and it's a very, very, very basic. But I think the broader conversation I'd like to have is, and when you guys are talking on your podcast, it's called Long War, Long War. It's I'm going to listen to it. Are the other guys as interesting as you?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, the key here is nobody's listening to us. So, I mean, you don't need to be fearful, but which guy do you like better than the other one?
I can't play favorites. I like to pick on everybody. No, everybody brings a really unique perspective to the show. So I think it's just a fun time, and
Yeah, exactly.
we do an hour as well. That's all the network gives us, you know.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
So my question is, or my discussion would like to be, is like you hear so many people, like I forget who I was talking to, but he had bought an airbrush and it sat in the drawer for 30 years. And finally one day he decided he was going to try it. And I think like what?
I think it was Chris Adams.
Yeah, I think it was too, but I wasn't going to say.
Oh, okay. You already mentioned him once on this podcast, so.
Well, I mentioned him, but I didn't mention his fear of airbrushing.
Well, I'm afraid of airbrushing right now.
Are you? Okay, well, that's just perfect.
I have 2 different ones sitting in a drawer, and I never use them because, well, I could probably brush that.
Yeah. So
and they terrify me.
And it seems like in wargaming, especially, that airbrushing is a key element, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's cool because you can batch paint large numbers of things, and it makes sense to at that scale. But there's, I'm not sure where it would come into play the same technique wise for railroading, because unless I guess it depends on the scale of the cars, because I just don't know enough about it to give you good advice. But like I batch paint 5 to 6 figures at a time, doing some pre-shades and shades and things. And then there's parts that you just can't do with an airbrush still, which I'm sure would be the same. But it's for me, it's a time saver, and I break up my painting enough that, hey, if I just, do this for like an hour or two, I'll matte seal it and come back tomorrow and lay down some more fades, because I'm not going to have 6 to 8 hours to work on one project in a day because I got work and other stuff.
Okay. There were a couple different things in that sentence that I heard but didn't understand. Pre-shade versus a shade. Can you break that down?
So, pre-shading is more of theory, like color theory. So, like you can lay down like over a black undercoat, you might want to spray white next, because what it's going to do is if you just like go with a red over a black per se, your red's going to fade. But if you go white first and then with the red over it on a black undercoat, you're going to get a really poppier red. But then there's all sorts of rabbit holes, because you can be like, you know what? Red's got purple in it. So I'm going for a purple tone red. So instead of white, I'm going to use a really bright purple over like almost like a lavender, right? So like you can get all sorts of crazy. I've seen people do pink for yellow. It's pretty interesting stuff when it comes to the color theory, but you can just be very, middle of the road and just do white over black undercoat, then come back with your next bright color and it'll pop more.
Hey, Lionel.
Yeah.
I feel like an idiot. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Because if you have a base color and then a color on top of it, you can't just paint red on top of black without expecting the black to. But I think my instinct would have been, well, that's not red enough. Let me just paint more red on that. Another layer of red.
Which isn't wrong.
No, but then you end up with a bunch of thick paint, which is exactly what's terrified me before. So then I think you mentioned that if you're painting a model and then you're going to come back to it the next day, you'll add a layer of matte clear just to come back to it the next day.
Yeah. So the problem, it's not a problem, but when you airbrush, it's really thin layers. So like if you don't matte seal it when you're done with your work for the day, and you just leave it, you might grab it or just like accidentally knock it over on your table and it would scrape in like an area or something. And then you're like, oh crap, now I gotta build that back up, because otherwise, it's going to look weird. There's going to be a definite difference in color, and that's a little annoying.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think, did you mention the word post shade as well? Or did I
might have said highlight. I don't know.
Okay. Highlight. Yes, that's what it was. Sorry. So highlighting would be or highlighting or fading. You said, I think you said fading, and sorry. This is why I write things down. So, okay.
Or you know what? Instead of writing things down, just listen to the podcast.
Well, there you go. Yes, but then that means somebody be listening to this podcast.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That's the problem. Yeah, we don't want to get our ratings too high.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
yeah, we're pretty happy with 3 listeners.
Yeah, exactly. they're loyal.
Yeah.
So you have your base color down, and then you have additional color on top of that to either emphasize or fade or like talk about that process.
So generally my workflow would be a primer coat, which could be applied with the airbrush, like a primer undercoat, which could be applied with the airbrush, or you could use aerosol rattle can. Those are a little bit, easier to use and quicker. And then you do like a pre-shade if you want, which could be any sort of color depending on what your next color is going to be. So say you're doing a red, you would want to then, and you have to be careful with red, obviously, because if you do white and you go red over white, well, that might look pink depending on how you do it. So, there's a little bit of technique too. So then from that red, there's all sorts of different reds because red goes like into the brown spectrum, into the purples. You can even mix a little yellow in there if you want. You get all sorts of crazy with red. Red and yellow are very interesting colors to work with. So then, you just kind of, what I do is I keep in the reservoir, in the airbrush itself, like I will keep adding a little bit more of a lighter color, whether maybe it's a white, maybe it's a yellow, or maybe it's just a different red altogether that's pre-mixed, and just kind of mix it in the reservoir as I'm going and just kind of work it up from there, depending on how much paint I have working and how much is left and how much I have left to do.
Okay, that's fascinating because in my mind, I have to pre-mix the exact color before I do anything with it. And so I'm testing that's not right, and then I'm testing that's not right. And what you're saying is you'll actually work it in the reservoir of the airbrush and keep doing progressive thin layers on the model?
Yeah, you can do it that way, which, that's everybody's not going to be doing that first. You can use those premix that you buy out of the bottle that are just different shades of a red, and just clear your airbrush and put that next shade in there. And as long as it's, the right shade in the right order, it's the same thing, which is obviously less thinking, right? Because if you're already, really concentrated on the airbrush itself, that's a lot easier for some folks learning,
You know what the key thing he said there for me, Derek?
What's that?
Less thinking.
Hey, we're good at that on this podcast.
Rob, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for.
Okay. Do you have time if we stop this podcast, do you have time to do another one right away? Which would take like another hour?
I don't today. No, I have another appointment, unfortunately.
Another podcast?
No. What do I have? Hold on, let me look. Oh, I got a appointment with a fulfillment partner.
Oh, okay. Can I? I'll ask you off the air.
And we just keep rolling into the second podcast.
Yeah.
Guys, I gotta go.
You never let them off.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so all right, let's leave. So would you mind coming back on the show in a month or two?
Yeah, we could probably arrange something. I don't know when this is going out, but if any of y'all, well, I know not y'all, but any of the 2 other people listening, I guess, wanted to check this all out in person, there's the largest miniature war games convention, I guess, in the world, will be in a few weeks. It's March, 26th? Yeah, March 26th to the 30th in Milwaukee. So if you're out in the Midwest, it's called the Adepticon. So,
well, you know what I could do, Derek?
What's that, Lionel?
I could release this on March the 24th.
Is that enough time for one of our viewers in Milwaukee to make plans to go?
Yeah, for the listener in Milwaukee that he actually isn't in Milwaukee. Apparently, he lives in just outside of Madison, Wisconsin.
That's right. Yeah,
but that would give him like almost 3 weeks to get. Well, no, it would give him a couple of days to get.
Give him 48 hours. Yeah, I mean, I know Matt Milligan's in Milwaukee. I mean,
that's right, Matt Milligan. Yeah. Matt Milligan could go.
One of our listeners. Yeah,
he could go. He could go as our official representative.
I'm sure he has a T-shirt. we can send
Yes,
him.
he's got an AML T-shirt. And he could walk up to will you have a booth or something there?
So what we do is on Friday we run a doubles tournament. So like you can bring a buddy and you both play a game together against another 2-man team, and it's more hobby centric as your scoring is more about like painting your models in your display. If you brought bribes for the judges, i.e. us, or drinks for the judges, i.e. us, and your opponents, like T-shirts and stuff, like swag for your opponents.
Now we're getting into my kind of hobby.
This is great.
This is flat out bribe the guy, like
straight up, like, hey, and people will bring like bottles to the table and stuff. Like, you want a shot? I was like, absolutely.
This is what model railroading is missing.
Exactly.
We're not fun enough. Yes.
Yeah, no, we have uncovered the secret to making model railroading great.
Just just bring in bribery and alcohol.
Yeah, join the AML Nation. You won't remember anything about it by the end of the day. I love this. Yeah, so if you don't mind coming on again, in June or something, and we can pick up the conversation where we left off, that would be great fun, because we barely even touched on the airbrushing thing, and I didn't even. We got to get Derek doing some airbrushing here. And
be brave. Be brave.
I will. I also think after this one comes out, if our 2 other listeners have questions, maybe we can round up questions from the audience, and then we can do a like tech support call with Rob on all things painting and airbrushing.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, he does 3D printing. We haven't even covered that yet.
Right.
And also, like 3D printing, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we'll have to stay on touch. I'd love to be back.
Okay, let's do that. Because I don't even fully understand. Like now you've got to come back and explain to us this doubles tournament where basically you just bribe the judges.
Well, it's not all about bribes, but
I mean, yeah.
It's like bribes.
It sounds like an international hockey tournament between Canada and Russia, where the Russian referee is going to call every penalty in the book on the Canadian guys for just stepping on the ice. I had to get a hockey reference in there because I'm Canadian.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's in my citizenship profile. You have to, every time you're on the air, you have to make a hockey reference. Go Leafs, go! Now, see there, Derek. You with Roll Tide, you go Roll Tide in an arrogant kind of. We know we're going to crush you, so just be prepared. When you say "Go Leafs, go," you say it in a defeatist way. Go Leafs, go, because there's not a chance in hell we're going to win. So,
my first reaction when I heard that was, "Aw."
Yeah, exactly. What's your favorite sport, Rob?
I like watching football.
Okay. What's your favorite team?
I am a 49ers fan.
Oh, how'd you end up as a 49ers fan?
A really interesting series of events, starting with the Bills losing to the Dolphins and the Dolphins losing to the 49ers in the Super Bowl. And then I guess technically I was supposed to like the Ravens after they beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl, but I didn't. I just kind of stopped that.
Okay, for future reference, because you agreed to be on the show again, when you said it's an interesting series of events, we do have one particular rule that we're pretty sticky about on this podcast, is if you say something is interesting, you tell us the story, and then we determine whether or not it's interesting.
It's probably not that interesting. It's just like, we'll talk more about it sometime.
Yeah, there you go. Or if you have a funny story, you'll say, well, it's a funny story. Then you tell the story and we determine whether or not it's funny. We kind of stick to that because, people come on and tell you, I got a funny story about that. And you're sitting here and you're kind of going, well, it's not really that funny. Thanks anyways, though. So, okay, that's it. We're done, Derek.
Okay.
Because we got to stop. And otherwise, we'll just keep going and going. And Rob has agreed to come back on. And I'm going to go listen to. So the podcast is called Long War.
Yep.
Rob's website is called SpikeyBits.com. His YouTube channel is Spikey Bits. And if you're interested in anything to do, like it's not just about wargaming. There's tons and tons of information that could be used for any kind of hobby, any hobby that involves building and painting. Like I want to talk to you about 3D printing too, because I bet you're probably into that pretty good, eh?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we do a lot of that.
Exactly. And yeah. So and unfortunately, like I guess now that the guys that you're on the podcast know that you think you're without you the podcast wouldn't survive.
Well, I don't know if I said that.
Well,
That's what I heard.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Derek, can you give out our email address?
I can. If you would like to email us with questions about airbrushing or comments about this episode or really any episode, you can reach us through the wonders of email at ModelersLife@gmail.com. That's ModelersLife@gmail.com. Modeler with one L, like the long war, not two L's, like alcohol.
Nice. Because when you're doing a doubles tournament, you just basically get the judges hammered and boom.
Or when you go to a nerd bar, you get a beer, you do your painting.
Yeah, exactly.
Your models.
Yeah, there you go. Right. And if you enjoyed this particular podcast, today is free. This is a Monday podcast and it's free. But if you'd like to have twice as much podcasting every week, for just a few cents a day, you can join our Patreon channel and get twice as much podcasting a week. And our Tuesday podcast, Rob, is a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more down home. It's kind of like sitting on the back porch with Andy and Barney, and after Aunt Bee made one of her great Sunday meals. And it's just, or like on Big Bang Theory. Yeah, it's like when they're sitting in the lunchroom. It's like that.
Yep.
And if you go to our $10 level on the Patreon channel, you have a chance to enter a new game that is sweeping the globe. So if you're in the $10 level, everybody that's in the $10 level gets a T-shirt every year that's only available to Patreon members. Now, the key with that is the guy that's in charge of sending out the T-shirts is he's confused. And so the beauty of the game is it's basically the game's called Hey Dude, Where's My Shirt? And because everybody gets their shirt, they're just not sure when they're getting their shirt. So some people get them and some people need a couple of shirts coming to them. And it's a very exciting game. You could probably do little figures for it. And yeah, so this has been a great podcast. It's on the free channel. We'll put a link to Spikey Bits when we put it on our website, and we'll talk to Rob again. And it'd be fun to talk to you in June or something. And after you've had a chance to debrief and gather your thoughts after the big convention in Milwaukee.
Oh man, looking forward to it.
And are you going to do any podcasting while you're up there? No,
we take the week off for that.
Okay. Will you do walk around with your phone and maybe do some video work or?
Oh yeah, we'll take a lot of videos and post them up. We'll have some up the same, like live, but a lot of the Army features and different things will go out over the next couple of weeks as we, get them processed and things.
When you're there with your two buddies, I'm sorry, Wyatt and
Kenny.
Wyatt and Kenny. That sounds like trouble.
Oh yeah.
Hey, when you're there with Wyatt and Kenny, tell them about the podcast. And what would be fun, Derek, is if we got all three of them on at the same time.
That would be great.
That would be a lot of fun.
I will definitely mention it to him.
All right. Yeah, you can say, I was on this podcast with these two guys, they're the model railroader guys, so you can imagine what they were like. But it might be fun to be on there and see how it goes.
It would double our audience.
Exactly. I think that's it. I think we're done.
Right on.
Great.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, okay. There's still one more thing we have to do. Now, at the appropriate moment, we need you to say happy rails to you.
Oh, okay.
Now, the key to this is there's no singing, there's no dancing, there's no interpretation of any kind. All we need you to do is say with enthusiasm, happy rails to you. Do you think you'll be able to handle that?
I could probably make it work.
Okay. Well, Rob, as we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, and the sun slowly sets over the back 40, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
happy rails to you.
While in Busted Knuckle, guests of a Modeler's Life podcast stay at the Casa del Sol Motor Court and Inn, where late-night dancing at the Rumba Room is a magical event to be experienced.
It's another Lincoln Homer.
But we wanted enthusiasm.
Is this one of those tricks where you're like, oh no, say it one more time. One more time with me.
Yeah, exactly.
But what he's not telling you, Rob, is it took him about 6 tries to remember that sign off on the last episode.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I'm like,
I'm just proud of Lionel for making it through it.